It says that they did a couple of things to Klal Yisrael. Nebuch, what did they do? They cut off their bris milah. They and they, you know, in that way mutilated them, and they also encouraged immoral behavior between men and so on. And because why? That's an ultimate denial of truth. You can't deny the reality of Hashem's creation, but Amalek says, no, I have my own reality. I have my own perception. This is what we're going to call love. This is what we're going to call holiness. This is what we're going to call... Okay. So Yisro stands in direct opposition to that. And that's why I want to say that the names Putiel and Cain here are not negative, because they showed him whose great passion for Hashem was channeled into two great individuals who are associated with those names. Pinchas on the one hand, and Yael on the other hand. Yael, right? Yael. Both a man and a woman, by the way. So this is what Yisro brings to the table. Now, the question that we asked about why he went to such extremes that he wants to have groups of 10. And you know what Moshe says? Does Moshe listen to him? Now, what would you have expected Moshe to do for such a radically changing, game-changing structure to the way Torah and halacha would be adjudicated? Who would you think Moshe would consult with? Do we find any record that he asked Hashem? Nothing. It says, Vayishma Moshe lekol chosno. He said, great idea, let's do it. Oh, I have a little work to do. I just have to find 60,000 good people. May take a couple hours. You know? That's a big job. And then the politics. Who's going to be Asar Elef? And who's going to be Asar Meya? And who's going to be Asar Chamishim? And who's going to be Asar... Can you imagine the politics of that? In electing one rabbi, there's enough politics, right? Imagine electing 60,000. He did it anyway. Why did he do it? Because it wasn't about halacha. It was just trying to say, this is how you're going to help people find the truth. They just can't listen to you. They have to be involved in the process. They have to be discussing it. They have to be part of it. They have to be teachers. They have to be responsible. Talmud Torah is not about your learning. It's about your teaching. Teach. And then you'll find the truth. Mikol malamdei hiskalti. I learned from all my teachers, but who did I learn most from? My talmidim. Talmidim osmekurim. If you don't have teachers, says Moshe, if you're going to be Moshe Rabbeinu, and there's no other Rabbeinus, it's going to be a failure. Everybody has to be a shtickle Moshe Rabbeinu. Everybody's a little Moshe. In fact, by the way, that's what the Zohar says, that every rabbi is called a Moshe. What does that mean? Because in a miniature sense, they're doing the job of being Melamed Torah La'amo Yisrael. What does Moshe? What does Rebbe mean? Rebbe in the Mishnah means Rabban, right? Rabban, Rosh B'nai Yisrael, ahead of and that's what they're called here. They're called Roshei Ha'am, Rebbes. And you know what? A nice small class. Yisro says you take a class of 100 people. It's not a class. It's not a Rebbe. You know. And he also kind of introduced the idea of a minion, which is remarkable. This is the first place, not the first, because we see by Eliezer's camels. How many camels did he take? He took 10 camels to make Sheva Brachos. That was the first hint that there's such a thing as a minion of people that you need. However, this was the only one that's explicit in the Torah, that you need 10 people constitutes a group within Klal Yisrael that has power and significance. I once heard from Rav Soloveitchev Zatzal that the way you look at a minion is because the Gemara in Brachos asks whether more people you have together, you change the benching, right? When you have 10 people together, you say, Nevarech Elokeinu shechalnu mishalo, right? And if you have 100 people, does it change? If you have 10,000 people? So the Gemara has a debate about this. It gives different things that you could say when you have up to like 600,000 Jews. But Rabbi Akiva's position is, whether you're benching with 10 people or whether you're benching with 10,000 people or 100,000 people, you just say, Baruch Elokeinu shechalnu mishalo. There is no qualitative advancement in the Kedusha. You hear that? Kedusha is achieved with a minion. 11 people is not more Kedusha. It's Barov Am Hadras Melech. It may be a Kiddush Hashem. But in terms of its holiness, it's not any more holy than anybody else. That's the brilliance that Yisro saw. He saw it. Okay. Now let's see what comes next. At the end of the Aseret Dibros, what happens? What happens is that Hashem... in the middle of the Aseret Dibros, what happens to Klal Yisrael?
They can't take it.
They can't take it. So much so that according to some Meforshim, let's slow this down. We have not a lot of time, but we'll just take this piece step by step. According to Rashi, all of the Aseret Dibros were said at once. Everything. Now, is that something that the human ear can hear? That's what he says. It's not something that human can... And then they went one by one. And how many were they able to hear of the one by ones? Only the first two. So even when Hashem broke it down to a simpler, way, they still couldn't comprehend it. And it says that probably during the first Dibur, but perhaps even during the first one, their neshamas went out of them, and they died. And Hashem had to bring them back to life. So they experienced Tchias HaMesim. And it was also the original surround sound. You ever hear about surround sound? It says, the Mefarshim say that they heard the sounds on every, below them, above them, on every of their spatial directions. And they also saw the sounds. How do you see sound? Can you see sound? So my nephew told me an interesting thing. He said that there was recently an experiment to capture sound waves and be able to view them on an electric grid, so that they would actually, how when you take a microphone, the lines go up and down. Here, I have it here. Look, right here. My sound is higher. It gets like that. I stop and it gets lower. So you can actually see, with the help of technology, you can see sound more accurately today. And he said when they pronounce words from English or other languages, they're just gibberish. When you pronounce Hebrew letters, the sound wave looks like the letter. The sound of a bass is in the shape of a bass, if you could understand that. So then all this was unified, and they died, and they came back, and Hashem broke it down for them. But even that wasn't good enough. And Chazal tell us that they ran away. They literally ran away. When did they run away? Probably the minute that they stopped hearing the Aseret Dibros said over by Moshe, right? Because the last 8 are said over by Moshe, and they say Amen according to Rashi, right? And then they ran away. How far? 12 mil. A mil is quite a distance. The entire space of the camp. In other words, like an auditorium where if it was full, everybody left. Every last person left. They went backwards. How much? The space of where everybody was, they vacated it. We want no part of this. Even though they said that they asked Hashem, we want to hear from Hashem. Daber ita imanu v'nishma'a. V'yidaber itanu. They say to Moshe, we didn't bargain for this. We thought that we would be able to handle it, but we can't. Ata, you go, and you speak to Hashem and let us know how it went. Come back with a full report. So look how many levels there were. Level 1, where everybody heard everything. All the sounds, all the dibros, they saw everything, they heard everything, impossible to process. Then Hashem broke it down a little bit and said, okay, I'm going to speak out loud, right? But I'm going to make it one at a time. Let's break it down. Give you a chunk at a time so you can digest it. Just like he gave the Torah to Moshe that way, a parsha at a time. So here's one dibur, here's a second dibur, and they say, we absolutely can't handle that either. So what are you going to do? He says, I'll talk to Moshe, and Moshe will tell you what I said. But what Hashem did to Moshe's voice was remarkable. It says, Kol shofar, it says, Elokim ya'aneno b'kol. Hashem used Moshe's voice box as a megaphone. so that a human voice cannot sustain getting louder and louder. But Moshe's voice got louder and louder. So Hashem spoke through the throat of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is completely remarkable. But the imagery of that is that, Rabbi Nachman says this, he says that that's what every rabbi tzaddik is really all about. They're carrying the call of Hashem. It's a kol shofar. What is the kol shofar? Come, do tshuva, come back. Here's the truth. Wake up. Wake up. Rosh Hashanah is coming. Yom Kippur is coming. The day of judgment is coming. There is a truth. There is a dayan. And that wake-up call is what emanates out from Moshe Rabbeinu. And even that they couldn't handle. And they ran away. Every single person left the auditorium. Can you imagine? They all left. They all went back, an entire camp. So now what? What's the solution? So what's the solution? There's only one solution that can work. Yisro had it right to begin with. Didn't Yisro have it right to begin with? There just was no way that they're going to be able to have that direct chain. Yisro actually called it right on the spot. He said, it's not going to work this way. It's just not going to work. We have to break it down, and everybody on their level. There's some people on the level of the captains of thousands, some people on the level of chamishims and hundreds, and there are people who are on the level of 10, and each person has to be responsible to be the voice of Hashem, the kol shofar, for that group on their level. Yeah.
So let's just go to 10, and each one of them goes to 10, and then each one of them goes to 10?
Moshe, very good, very good. There is a say, the Gemara says, the Gemara says like this. Yeah, Baruch Hashem. The Gemara says, based on the psukim, Hashem said, Moshe, you stand here by Kabbalas Torah, and underneath him was who? Aaron. And then underneath him was Cain. And underneath them was these leaders. And they had a different position in Har Sinai. Why? Because they had a different position in giving over the Torah. Aaron is the closest to Moshe because he got some of the parshas of the Torah himself, and in tandem with Moshe. So he's number 2. And in fact, every single dibur of Torah that Moshe ever heard, the first person he reviewed it with was Aaron. And then they called in the next group, which were the sons of Aaron. And then they called in the Shivim Skenim. And each time, who spoke? Moshe spoke. So everybody had a chance to hear it. Aaron heard it. People were hearing it time and time again. And then they each were becoming more expert to give it over down the line. Okay? And that's how the Torah was given over. So in a sense, Yisro was quite on target. And now I'll just conclude with this thing. Look at the end of this parsha. The end of the parsha is strange. It says, after the Aseret Dibros, right? Magnificent Aseret Dibros. We could talk about that all day. Hashem says to Moshe, Ko tomar el bnei Yisrael, atem ritem ki min hashamayim dibarti mechem. Bottom line, you did see me speak to you. And that's what's going to make you my chosen people forever. You're witnesses that I spoke to you, every single one of you. 6 million of you, however many it was. V'lo tasuni ti elokei kesef elokei zahav lo sasu lachem. Don't make me, this is like a repeat of the Aseret Dibros again. Wait a minute. He says, yeah, and don't do avodah zarah, and then make me a mizbeach of adama. Make me a earth-filled mizbeach. And you'll bring your olos and your shlamim, etc. B'chol makom asher azkir shemi, wherever you call my name, avo elecha uberachticha. What is Hashem saying to Moshe? Tell them that if they can't come to me, I will come to them. And then he says, V'im mizbach avanim taseli, if you're able to build a more substantial mizbeach, you get your act together in a greater way, still, lo tivnei aten gazis. Do not use a sword. A sword destroys life, and a mizbeach is going to revive life. Matan Torah is actually tchias hamesim. We know, Chazal say, v'chol ha'am roim es hakolos. Everybody saw. What do you mean everybody saw? Weren't there some blind people there? Weren't some people with cataracts? No. When Hashem's Shechina appeared on Sinai, whatever medical issue you had was restored. People who lost limbs, their limbs were back. People who broke things, because look, they were slaves. They were all broken people, like the survivors from the camps. What, they were physically well? They're lucky they're alive. No, they were completely healed. Because that's, when you're with the Shekhinah, you have a complete refuah. He says, and, so don't use a sword. V'lo ta'aleh b'malos al mizbachi asher lo tigaleh ervascha alav. The last pasuk is that when you take a step up the altar that you're going to build in whichever place I come to you, make sure not to take big steps. Why don't you take big steps? Because big steps are not modest. Why? They wore like cloaks. But 1 second, they were wearing breeches, they wore pants, so what's not modest about taking a large step? Even so, because you can't see the breeches under there, so it may look like you're revealing yourself in an inappropriate way. No, I can't have that. And if you look at this, in this little paragraph, it gives us the three major averos that we've been trying to deal with since Adam Harishon. What are they? And they're the three primary sins of Klal Yisrael that we have to give our lives for, because this is what we got our lives for. Gilui Arayos, the last one, don't be immodest. All the laws of tznius and shmira, of the relationships, of the holiness of the body. And then avodah zarah, don't make me elokei kesef elokei zahav, right? And shvichus damim, don't use a sword. In this little section at the end of the Torah, Hashem gave them like a mini takeaway. What's the purpose of the Torah? A human being is created with a nefesh bahamis, and we have three primary drives that the Torah will help you grow from. Those are Gilui Araya, Shvichus Damim, Avodah Zarah. And Shvichus Damim doesn't necessarily mean picking up a sword. What does it mean? Lashon hara, undermining someone's business. Whatever it is, taking away, undermining the other person, etc. So what happened at the end of the parsha is Hashem says to Moshe, I get it. It's important what happened. And this, Rabbi Nachman says, is like this. Sometimes we reach a point in our lives where we're really on a high. We're just really steiging. Our davening is davening, and our emunah is emunah, and we're inspired. And there are some days that we're just flat. Just flat. Can barely, not you people, of course, but some barely get the davening out of their lips. They're confused, they're disoriented. They may be somewhat caught in the web of these three problems, which represent the three main character flaws, which are what? Kina, Taiva, and Kava. And this has always been my understanding of the three mitzvos, is that they're associated with three primary character flaws. Right? Because what's going to lead you to Taiva is obvious. That's the desire for gratification. And then Kina could lead to bloodshed. That's what happened with whom? Kayin, Kin'ah, which was rectified by whom? Who's the rectification of Kayin? According to the Ari HaKadosh? Yisro. So he's called Kaini because he is the correct, and who's the ultimate expression of Yisro's correction of Kaini is Yael. Yael, by killing not someone, Hevel was Moshe was the Gilgul of Hevel, not victimizing the innocent, but carrying out judgment on the wicked. That's the rectification. Kina, kano kinesi lashem. There is a room for kina. The halacha is if a Jew sees another Jew going with a non-Jew, with woman, and there's no death penalty for that, right? It's a big avera, but it's not a death penalty. Kanoi and pogimbo. But if you're a kanoi, you're allowed to kill him. And that's what Pinchas did. It was an extrajudicial killing. Because that was the tikkun of the jealousy of Cain. Instead of the jealousy being for themselves, the jealousy goes in kano kinesi la Shem. So I transform my midas of kina to kinas Hashem. Okay? So that and avodah zarah is the union of kavod. Why? Because you don't want to give kavod to Hashem. You want to give kavod to yourself or to someone else. You're giving the kavod where the kavod is not there. So in summary, Yisro is a very, very important figure. He first of all understood that Torah must be, you have to really have a passion for the truth. And Hashem wanted us to see and learn and understand the experience of Yisro and how he reacted to the fact that there was a divine judgment on the enemies of Klal Yisrael. He said, now I'm willing to throw everything away, everything I ever believed in, because I see the truth. And that's what a Jew has to do. That's our approach to Kabbalah Torah, and that has to be small and given over, and the way that you can handle it, and not too much. And a lot of times you have Baal Tshuvas that they get all excited and then they burn out. They just burn out. No, a little bit at a time, incremental growth. And if you have a surge at one period of time of growth, you may have a period of 6 months or a year where you're like these kids that come to yeshiva and they're on fire, and then it takes them 6 or 7 or 10 years till they integrate and balance out. Really. It's okay too. As Reb Nachum always says, a little bit is also good. A little bit of Matan Torah is also good. And that's really the lesson of Yisro. So, great question. So the only reason he leaves is why? To spread Judaism. Why? He's a shliach of Moshe Rabbeinu, for the Chabadniks out there. The first shliach to spread Judaism was who? That he was made a shliach by the Rabbi, was Yisro, because he was says by Yishalach Moshe. Moshe sent him out as a shliach. He was the Chabad of Minion. Because that's who Yisro is. If Yisro's not out there getting people excited about Judaism, there's no reason for him to be around. I think that's my insight. My insight is that he's not happy unless he's a shaliach out there being makar of people. Otherwise, it's not his nature. Okay, so we should be zocha. This was a National Holocaust Remembrance Day in the world, today. And I just wanted to say that Yisro represents the exact opposite. He represented the non-Jew who could see the truth about the Jewish people. And the Holocaust is all about the lies that are told about the Jewish people, the denial of the truth. Amalek perpetrated the Holocaust. The counterbalance to that, Yisro. If we see in the Umos HaOlam, Chasidei Umos HaOlam, Hutaka saw the truth and said what's going on here was wrong back then, and hopefully back now. At least Shmuley Boteach is in town with Roseanne Barr. Did you hear about this? Yeah. A Groisa Rebbetzin. A Groisa for sure. I don't know about Rebbetzin. And she came to support the Yehuda and Shomron, and she came to say the truth about BDS. And she's someone in that world of Amalek, of entertainment and fantasy, which is what Amalek really represents, a fantasy about what life is instead of the reality of the MS. And you know what? If this is changing, then B'ezras Hashem, we should see a full change. B'ezras Hashem.